Finally Changed Reading Series program. This is the last program of the season, so this is the big finale until September. Our reader this evening is Whipp. He's a professor of English at the University of Nebraska. He is a prolific writer. He has published in numerous journals and anthologies, and his poems and explications have appeared in numerous publications. He is very concerned with teaching. He's been concerned with that certainly his entire career in English. In 1989, he won the Sorensen Award for distinguished teaching. And with that, short and sweet, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Whipp.
Thank you very much. Heidi anticipated my stance very precisely. I'm here, I think, under false pretenses in some circumstances. In this reading series, there have been a lot of poets and a lot of very good poets who have read. And for what she termed the finale, you have a teacher. You have a poet, you have a teacher who writes poetry, and who was a teacher for 20 years before he began to write poetry. And I think perhaps Heidi has the last in this series in order to make the point that anybody can write poems. And that's, in effect, that's the subject of the first poem. I'll try to give a sample of the different kinds of things that I write, and some of the different provocations from which poems have come in my experience. The first poem that I'll read is entitled Making Poems. I've been graded on so many things, I'm fit for scarcely more than salad making. I've been washboarded by a long line of graders, large yellow machine-like lady, making my sluggish prairie lines square and smooth. And for many years, more often, I flunked than not. In the third grade, Miss Culvert gave me an F in breathing. I've always been grateful that she let me do it anyway. I sometimes wonder if a grade book somewhere would tell me how well I did at lovemaking. A C minus, I should hope, but perhaps a D or F. My wife has never given me a grade, at least not face to face, for reasons I suppose one should not ask about. Wouldn't it be dreadful, though, if only those who got an A in that could keep on doing it? And sometimes, now and then, perhaps high B's. And poem writing, a sort of making love in many ways. The joy, the loss of self and time, and the momentary drowning in the lake of infinite hope and beauty, there by natural right for everyone to try to. The next few poems are autobiographical poems that say a little bit about where I come from. I'm a gardener, and I'm a composter. I enjoy making compost. And as my wife said, playing in the compost pot. And so this poem is entitled Compost. Cannonballs for ladybugs, earthen pellets and sticks and twigs, and gross bits unredeemed of grass and lifelike still, draped here and there with earthworms, purplishly content as mere intestine. I spade my compost with all the satisfaction, with all the wonder at the magic of it that my grandson takes in his own freshly minted stool, smelling the musky promise of it as if I'd done it myself. Turning, staring, the child delights in recognition as he would another child or mirrored self. We clap our hands and laugh with him across the aeons, what echoes laugh of compost to ashes and dust to dust. I lived on a farm in my adolescent years, and the next poem comes out of my experience of living on a farm. It comes from the day when I got my hand caught in a machine, which all true farmers have done at some time or another. It's called Scar. A scar of a scar. That's all that's left. I never thought I'd lose the loss of the scar, but I do. The nail is perfect now, unless you hold it in the light just right. A line appearing and disappearing, where once the pulley ripped the nail at dark, impulsive speed. Riding Scar's faint memory is a day I'll lose if it rides too far. The hay baler, red and raucous, his mind a ramrod that day. Me in overalls and tan felt hat ventilated toward the smoldering sky. Eye cocky in young muscles burned fatigue. John Deere in neutral, I slide from seat to drawbar and feel alfalfa stubble crunch beneath my working soles. I pass the flywheel, see the hay gathering on the drive belts, and reach casually, two fingers fall through without poised, bleeding, torn nails numb by thought. A young moment written in flesh, in lines, impulsing, jagged, precious as sin, redolent with sweat, arrogance, and ignorance. Now I wish the lines were written better, deeper, more bloody, not landing in bleak forever. I still go back to the farm community where I live and visit youngsters that I was in country school with who had never left the farm. And partly this poem comes out of my being a gardener and my continuing to participate in that community. It's called Hauling Water. The garden hose greenly marks my path as I haul water along its slow length, past the garden, beyond the corner of the garage, behind the trees to the compost pile, and dump the heavy 5-gallon pail on top the springly brown raked leaves. My neighbor pauses in his fading to mark my doing the hose's part. He doesn't see me be my friend's slight body, hips canted with the weight, pale and load-bearing legs, dancing, alternating steps, rhythmic and patient as morning glories. Another step, my friend and I, 15 again, in overalls, 5 buckle overshoes, the pail, 5 ground gallons corn, and night and morning crawl. It's in the cant of the hips, the slow, ancient dance of farmers anywhere. Take 2 steps with a pail of water, and it's all alive, a poem with feet and no words. This is the most recent poem I've written, and I'm not sure if it works yet, but I will read it. I was born in Florida. I'm a Southerner. I was born on the Georgia border, and I left that family when I was young. And only recently have I gone back to find that family. And I've gone back to in fact, last year I went back to a place where I was a child, a place where my grandfather was a florist and my father was a nurseryman. My father committed suicide. It's called Going Home. I have been shining the leaves of my peperonia obtusifolia. I'm worried about my Shakespeare class. So I shine the leaves of my peperonia, listening for Shakespearean turns of the leaf. My grandfather bred better plants than kids. The leaves of his son never shine. How could he be so frightening and far away, sharing with me the front seat of the touring car? Curtains on the windows, the hairs in his mustache, stiffly black and stiffly white. My grandfather, saying nothing, turning neither right nor left. I shall read Shakespeare. What will my grandfather say then? I am looking for my father and my grandfather. Beer bottles and clay pots, whole and undisturbed. A bamboo grove, live and moving on. Dead stems leaning upright still. Foundation lines are still visible. Here the potting shed, there the well, here the first house, there the second. And here, longer than two men, it ties either the pile of beer bottles, stuffed beer bottles. I look for buckshot wrapped in grains, stuffed beer bottles, whole and undisturbed. If I sit down, my buns will grow roots, my arms will turn to bamboo branches, my leaves will sink. The next two poems come out of my experience in the rural culture of South Dakota. One is Generalization about farm wives, and it's kind of a picture of what it was, of some of the limits on the roles of women in rural South Dakota in the 40s and 50s. When the men left the table burping compliments to go outside and smoke the price of corn and fall of future rain, the women claimed the table, talking of recipes for Waldorf this and Riviera that, and of the dating girl too plump for singing. Then fell to foraging the men's plates and rhythm of a piece of meat in this pause, a dab of salad sauce, a couple celery sticks, a bone to suck from old Julie's plate, a half piece of bread the kid had left, a dab of mashed potatoes, a crust from Everett's pie plate. Better us, they laughed, than slopping good food to hogs. The next is a generalization about what it was like to grow a male, or what it was like to be a man in this rural culture in relation to words, which is something that I understand from watching my students come in from the rural community, understand is still current to some degree. This is called farm talk. Generalization about how males use language in this culture. The dog runs loose in the yard, black and white like a butler, circling the visitor's car, announcing officiously until the master comes. The men, their forearms on the barnyard fence, stoop to pick fresh stems before they loose their words in hellos. The words pull against their lips, stretching them tight and thin, barely moving away, gliding footless like habited nuns on holiday. Ashamed their words should frisk that much, they tie them up again. Tied to single syllables, the words lie still and pert. Lie true as good lie true. My experience of the rural culture doesn't quite fit the picture that you get in the magazine Country Living or that you get on the television shows. And one of the things that struck me about it was the way in which so many lives were thwarted or dwarfed or even boarded. And The next three poems come out of that sense. These are character poems in a sense. A friend of mine, Kelly Olson, told me recently that an awful lot of plains writers are inventing a past. Seem to have trouble with the past and have to construct a usable past. Certainly this next poem fits that category because it never happened. I made it up out of whole cloth. It's for my stepfather, though. One prairie summer night, the sky gilding even barns and barnyards in smutted blue overalls and a full day's work. He and I stood watching against the sky the swallows' flights. Those flights, he said, stitched the years together, stitched the years and generations together. Another night I watched and thought of that. Their arcing rhythms stretching from timeless summer to timeless summer unvaried, climbing horse barn rafters year after year, building by daub on arcing daub designs, conventional and true, nest lines rhyming nest lines year in, year out, flight lines rhyming nest lines, tuxedo tails rhyming lines of flight and nest, and echoing year to unending year, until he was I, a child, wondering at the gold in the darkening sky, and on the burnished breast, and long black gliding lines of swallows on a timeless summer evening, and I forever knew just how it had to be with him, tied by swallowed lines to airs impossible for him. The next poem is again a reflection of the limitations on the roles of women in world culture in the 40s. It's called Willie Schleppenbach. And Willie is a real person. Willie Schleppenbach had small hands, toughly calloused, brown, wrinkled, bathed in a mist of golden hair, and her younger sister was embarrassed by her. Willie's overalls hung loose on her slight frame, and she hooked her thumbs in the straps like a man. Her voice was low in her throat and gravelly. Her hair swept back in a ducktail. She wore her greasy cap jaunty and low over her right eye, and had biceps hard as hickory. She shoveled a lot, as truckers do. When Bill Stelzer got put away for writing bad checks again, and left his tiny blonde wife and blue-eyed girl with nothing to eat, the townspeople looking on curiously and wondering, Willie took in wife and child and fed them until the law was satisfied. I never saw the women in the town speak to Willie. Yet when she sat at table with the crew, just one of the men, they served her with a subtle softness. And when they spoke of her among themselves, their voices had the gentle golden burr they used to speak of loved ones long dead. The next one is a similar poem. I've taken all the poems like that character in Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. I'm real good on death poems. I've left out all my death poems. Except this one. This one crept in because it was a character poem. It's entitled Little Billy Wolf, and Little Billy is a real person, and we called him Little Billy, or Billy, sometimes Billy. He was a small man. Little Billy Wolf, he died a-burning in the wintry flames. Little Billy Wolf, he died alone in the prairie night. Little Billy Wolf had none to say he could or couldn't. Little Billy Wolf stunk of grease and excrement. Little Billy Wolf had none to say the sun was hot, the weather, she's a you betcha scorcher, the corn she won't last. Little Billy Wolf had lost the sounds of human speech.
Little Billy Wolf, when he'd come to town, pointed. He'd baa sometimes softly like his wife would do, saliva sliding slimily down his grizzled chin, his eyes as wildly pleading yellow-brown as buck shoots. Little Billy Wolf, so wifely you never lambed. Little Billy Wolf, he died alone in the prairie night. Little Billy Wolf, he died a burning in the flame. That's enough character poems, eh? The next two poems are kind of the representations of the climate or the weather of the Midwest, and very specifically of Nebraska. These come out of Nebraska. The first is entitled The Spring Poem. Nebraska is pregnant 9 months of every year. Pregnant with summer. Hates being pregnant. Hates even worse giving summer birth. In late winter she is moody and unbearable. Gray as an old mare is, warm and cold by turns, forgetting her spring, and as the term for birth nears, she turns back again to winter and again, delaying new life with snow, shattering her oak trees and her pines, breaking down her elms, her flowering almonds, and browning the glorious buds of her sweet magnolia. Then she flips to the high, clean keening of the wind, the dry pain of the prairie wind, the screaming of the skyways, and the hail and tornadoes, dumping her angry debris across the lives of little people. She lurches into heat. Summer is born again. Nebraska lies panting in the sun, swearing in a stubborn heat never to get pregnant again. Like that. The next one is also a season poem, but it's another season. It's not summer, but it's season after summer. It's August in Nebraska. It is August in Nebraska. The cucumber vines, like old beachcombers, dry limbs caked as if with salt, collapse their summer blankness. The tomatoes, flushed with season's end, drunk with too much sun, split their sides and draw in their leaves. The swimming pools, dried up, closed. Now we speak of the summer in the past tense, totaling the harvest of our outdoor time, complaining like good vacationers preparing to leave the seashore for home, smelling the water through the screens, pressing wild flowers in old books, closing their minds like photograph albums. We clean the eaves, leaves about to fall like snowflakes, and opaque eye to sky calls again. Check again to see that storms need no repair. We pull weeds and sweep up acorns, packing the summer's growth in garbage cans firmly closed. On the windows, we hold off, keeping the screen, savoring the outdoor air through the open window. Air full of love before chill closes. I have a porch swing on my front porch. An old house. My wife and I very much enjoyed our porch swing. They're early in the spring and late in the fall. And this next poem comes from sitting on the porch swing and just watching what goes by, what happens. This time I happened to see some buzzards. And This poem comes out of seeing buzzards sitting on my porch swing. It's called Updraft, and it's about writing poetry. The buzzards have come to Lincoln this year. I've never seen them here before. Their vast fringed wings rigid against the rising air. I've seen them on the ground in Georgia, past flight, you'd say, lumbering, jointed, and moved, and yet the moment they are airborne, they move like gliders, quiet as cooling molecules, lighter than atoms in a pale moonscape. The gliders started heavily enough, tied umbilically to noisy planes, cutting loose when the air had released the energy latent in their rigid wings, and writing then their own soundless lines against the cloudless stationary blue sky. Sometimes the hours of a poem's coming are an active gliding sealed in a capsule void of noise and following out the lines of increasing energy, which something else is teasing from the poem itself. Sometimes it too starts heavily enough, the poem I'm working on, and I'll tie it to any damn thing that will get it off the awkward ground. The minute it's in flight, though, I cut that sucker loose. The train will trace the lines. It's got to. I don't know any other way to do it. I sure as hell can't tie it to someone else's noisy planing machine and expect it to fly. Once in a while, a poem will begin to soar, will hover against the heavens, its lines extended and smooth as it rides the updraft, as natural and sharp as the buzzard, and I'll wish I were still connected, but I know it's soaring only because I'm not. I've never checked to see if the buzzards have always been here or not, but suddenly I discovered them anyway. The next two, sometimes my poems are a little crazy, I think. The next two are what I think of as crazy poems. And the first one it's a very arbitrary kind of thing. You take one word and you say, I'm going to write a poem about that word. And the word I chose to write this poem about was snip. I don't know where the poem comes from. And I don't know what word, I don't know. But I like it. Down came a blackbird and snipped. Snips forever pursed men's mouths. Snip, 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 snip. Hissing like the snake in the garden, or like the flaming sword that cut Eden like a foreskin off man's knowing. Down came a blackbird and snipped. Samson didn't hear the snip, sniding to a stop all his strength, lips locking like tight scissors, leftover sound dusting the air, note crooned before melodic. Down came a blackbird and snipped. A child screams at the snip, snip at Delilah's smile behind the veil, at her barbaric intimacy, at snip tomorrow's men, their screams, snip, reach for temple pillars. Down came a blackbird and snip. Listen, those of my wife is a crooner. I thought maybe that poem, but she wasn't a crooner when I wrote that poem. Friday, this next poem comes out. I don't know where this one comes from. This one comes from my fear of touching cotton or flannel. I'm very neurotic about that. This is called Whitey. The creature lurking in the fibers of my brainstem, lying in wait for the time to leak out in late hours to roll reason aside, to ravish grammar, and to leave no tracks. White, dizzily white and fuzzy like cotton balls, batten balls, cotton batten balls stuffing between my toes, between my fingers and my armpits. Huge cotton batten balls stuffing my armpits, cotton batten balls up my anus, up my penis, in my belly button, and in my ears, and under my eyelids, cotton batten balls, and in my mouth and down my throat, cotton batten balls, big and dry and fuzzy and white, between my cheeks and gums, between my lips and gums, under my tongue, cotton batten balls, down my gagging, gagging, gagging. The creature wrapping me in one huge, soft, white cotton batten ball, and laying me finally in the cotton white batten box, and no one asking, where's mine? I keep the creature caught in the bloody fibers of my brainstorm. I stiffly cage the monster with my neatly ordered hair within my shirt and neatly knotted tie. I watch for the least sign, a single fiber riding on a blood cell, a fiber blocking a synapse, tickling a tendon, the curious tickling of a cotton crown rising inside the skull, and I drink, and I watch for the creature lurking in the fibers of my brain stem, lying in wait for my time. Sometimes I do pieces that are overtly polemical, and I don't like them, but I do them, so I'll read a couple of them. The first one comes out of my experience of religion in rural culture in the 40s and 50s. It's entitled The Darby Boys. The Darby Boys had religion, and they got it worse with every passing year, all except old Ernest, their quiet younger brother, the one the family sent to serve, their onward Christian soldier, their hostage to a dry and terrible God, a farm boy hungering for the feel of soil, a cow's tits and chaff and good fatigue, a thick-fingered, thick-tongued farm boy, mouthing difficult words and slim white lies and little sandwiches at Lady Ray's. When old Ernest, he got a bellyful in the lamb's pen, why, he quietly hung himself while the lambs watched and wondered when he would feed them again. The very next year, flax went 20 bushel, and corn by then 100. The price of lambs went up. I do some poems that are about a character whose name is Whipp. And this is a kind of poem that I learned to write from a poet by the name of Zimmer. I always thought he had the advantage with a name like Zimmer. Whipp is not me, but is a kind of persona who allows me to fantasize in ways that I don't fantasize in other times. The first one is entitled Whipp the Artist, Organizing the World. These are just blatantly wish fulfillment fantasies, I guess. It is as if Whipp held it all together. The world in pieces scattered lay on the perilous earth. The purple sounds of trains in leaves of green. The green keening of sirens and engines' red roar, and almost arc in the fire-gray sky. A pillar in the rolling prairie ground. The angles were all wrong, the arcs mere squiggles, lines by vandals. No winds blew, and people flowed flotsamly in random hard channels. Whipp placed himself just there. The world arranged itself by numbers, the pillar evenly dividing the world and bridging earth and sky. On either side, the arcs and lines in red brick sacks of mathematics seeds. The avenues of green and purple trees approach with measured step. The people channels, equidistant always from his heart. The people passing, waving by and wondering, made purposeful by him. He places himself just there. He holds it all together. But oh, when Whipp must up and leave, what chaos then must come. That comes, in fact, from walking on campus, walking out of the building, and finding myself seated in a position in which the campus was symmetrically arranged. There's a nice place to sit over there, outside, off the sidewalk, up in the pine trees on the north side of the library. The next poem comes out of that experience too, and it's another one of these Whipp poems, and it's called Whipp Disconnected. Whipp has disconnected himself, and he is here, perched on a hillock as if he were natural. The white pines with beds of bark and needles, the very pines and beds he has always thought were outdoor wallpaper, meld into his outer layers, as if they thought they were no different than he. You don't belong here, Whipp says to self. Be careful of your suit. And watch your time, my God, that's real dirt. Your arthritis will kill you. You're a full professor, you stoop. I think I hear organic spoken here, self whispers back to Whipp. The birds and pines and leaves and grass are singing here. Students mouth facelessly. Get back, they say. Go sit inside your office, get back in your chair, connect your ear to bone, wire fingers to console, let your buns grow electrically to break comfort in bland plastic. You don't belong here. I am decay and rot, Whipp murmurs, food for worms in grass and tree rot. The terrapin passing by expresses some concern. Are you all right? He's known for years, Whipp wasn't. I am a granite boulder, Whipp says quite out loud. Through layers of history since before time was, I have been thrusting to this very place, and now I have come. Quite so. The dean makes an oath while striding into the future. Professor at large, call security. I am a nematode, Whipp bellows, breaking down your phony dirt. I am a buffalo rolling in your private wallow. I am leaves and snakes and ruby-throated hummingbirds. The dean makes another note. Call maintenance. More people up the grass sign. This is also a Whipp poem, except Whipp is speaking in the first person here. So this isn't me still. But it's remarkably like me. This one is called Whipp's grandfather almost blesses him. He was there, my grandfather, 30 years after they buried him. There, not so much on as in the clouds, and yet in front of me and just above, like face to face in ordinary human size. The Whipp white pine, he repeated. I like that sound. Now that's worth doing. And he reached down his hand as if to shake my own and paused. The Whipp white pine. I did azaleas myself, but we were cramped for space. The Whipp white pine throughout the great black hills. My boy, I'm proud of you. And again he reached down his hand to where I sat atop the landscape hill. Or Harney's Peak perhaps, or in the Rockies, Pikes it may have been. The rolling earth all round, blanketed with pine, white pine, the Whipp white pine it may have been, and I, the author of it all, lolling at my ease like an old rattler on a summer rock. And from that cloud so far away, he reached again his hand down toward mine. The Whipp white pine, he said, forests and forest, hillside and mountainsides, as far as eye can see, the Whipp white pine. Why stop there, I said. We are in a poem. We shall have Whipp white pines growing in the air. We shall breed them big as California redwoods. We shall, boy, he said, are you shitting me? The cloud on which he somehow rode was darkening. 'Cause if you are, I'll blister your backside with lightning bolts. Where the hell are you anyway? Too late, I thought I should have turned the question back. I have a nice poem on violets, I said. The anemic clouds managed a bit of lightning, then cleared, leaving the pure blue prairie sky and hardly any white pine trees at all. Damn you, Joyce Kilmer, I said. I'll read just one more. And this poem, if I'm the last poet to show that anybody can write poetry, this last poem is to show that you can write a poem about anything. I once said that you could write a poem about anything, and someone said, well, surely you couldn't write a poem about an outhouse. And so I did. This is my outhouse. I had quite a bit of experience with outhouses, so I could do that. The thing is, the door never shuts all the way. The frame sits crooked, braced to keep from falling into its own hole. And you sit there with the door open, watching the creek fall away from the glen. You sit there grunting at the rocks lining the creek bank as the stream curves away, big rocks and little, rocks from hundreds of trips with the stone boat, every spring gathering again and again and again, the best rock that land ever made. You wonder what fierce dream drove them out, and if the earth groaned at their hard passing. You sit there pleased that for the moment no hard rocks drag you down. The thing is, the door never shuts all the way, scraping along the floor to a stop one way, butting against the Protestant frame the other. Actually, in the winter, a little snowbank forms there, an ice bank underneath, from all the early thawing, and many feet scraping over, and frost on the seat. And you sit there shearing cold with sketch lines, young trees you planted the summer before across the creek from the rock bank. A green and vital answer, someday, maybe, against that rock-ridden bank. You sit there pleased for the moment that there's one door that never shuts.
The readings will resume again in September. Thank you.